So hi, Soul Family, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Haji, and this is amazing Pre-Birth Stories. Our guests, plural, today are Elizabeth Carman and Neil Carman. And Elizabeth and Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. We're real excited to be here.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so Elizabeth, jump in and tell us your pre-birth, show us your pre-birth presentation.
So welcome to this presentation on our core spiritual nature. Our core is we are spiritual beings, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next on my keyboard. Sorry. No? All right. What we want to talk about welcoming consciousness into physical life. And primarily, we're going to be focusing on children and babies, but realize we've all been babies at one point. So we're talking about ourselves. And this is a special chart that's in our book, Babies Are Cosmic, Signs of Their Secret Intelligence. And these are some of the things we'll be discussing in the PowerPoint. And these are the 3 books that my husband and I have authored over the years. It's a fascinating topic, the journey of our soul to human life. And a lot of the stories I will be presenting today are coming out of the 3rd book, Babies Are Cosmic. So that's kind of the focus of this presentation. And in terms of the memories we are presenting in our book, and which will be the ones we're talking about today, when we talk about these different memories, these are coming from children spontaneously and unprompted. No one is trying to coerce them to say anything or questioning them. And the stories remain consistent over time, and that's an indication of some validity. And they lock in contact with the mother or parent. And as much as possible, we look for cases where there's validation, where the child remembers what happened at its birth, what happened in the womb, what happened at conception or before conception. Maybe they relate an event that mommy and daddy experienced before they were even conceived. So when we find that kind of validation, that helps to strengthen the case. They also speak in a very matter-of-fact, confident, serious tone of voice. Sometimes they'll just change their whole demeanor and almost sound like an adult speaking. And in some cases, as we're going to show in this presentation, the children will even artistically represent their memories. Okay, so the key points of this talk, we want to just give you a brief overview. Main points are that babies are conscious and aware from the beginning of life. This is not something that's been accepted by everybody. We could say the medical professions, psychologists, etc., for the last few hundred years have not considered this to be the case. And we'll be giving counter evidence to all of that here. How babies are conceived, how they're carried in the womb, and how they are birthed is etched in our body and psyche. And sometimes if that is a traumatic experience that happened in womb or at birth, there are ways that that can be healed with the child very, very simply and quickly. And we're going to give some cases where that happens. And also there's things to do if we can to even avert those situations. And this more complex consciousness, as we can see over here on the screen, consciousness is our core, and then we have all of these different advanced abilities that are being expressed by the children. The 5 types of memories, which I already mentioned, love sensing, telepathic sensing, pain sensing, personality, thinking, clairvoyant sensing and learning. All of that demands a new standard of medical care, and also in terms of how parents interact with their children. We need to bring in the power of love, and we're going to be giving some stories where the power of love works magic on the children when it's done properly. For hundreds of years, we've been taught that babies are born as blank slates. And here's the doctor studying all his textbooks on babies, and babies' cries are reflexes. They don't mean anything, it's just a reflex. So babies can't think, newborns can't think. Newborns can't smile until they're 4 months old. Oh my goodness. And so it's impossible, he's reading the text here, that newborns see, feel pain, learn, and remember what's being done to them. Painful procedures leave no permanent impression or lasting damage as a result of delivering babies. And even if they experience it, they're not going to remember it. So just don't worry about any of that. And we're finding that mothers are hearing a completely different side of the story here when they bring a child into the world. Experts say that Billy's learning and memory will switch on like a computer at age 2 or 3, but I don't believe it. Her little child's already telling her his memories or other indications that he is way beyond what the textbook babies are teaching us. We're going to move to a beautiful story that comes to us from Japan, a little boy by the name of Senna. And his story illustrates his memory of his birth and his ability to sense love. And here we have a picture of Dr. Akira Ikegawa, and he is the source of this story. He is working in this field in Japan, and he said, I began to question the medical belief that newborns don't feel pain. And if they do, they won't remember it. So whenever, he's an obstetrician, whenever it became necessary to use forceps, I asked permission from the baby. And the first time he did that, the baby did not cry. And usually they were crying for hours. They were just really stressed out. He said the infant was very calm postpartum. After that, I asked permission from all unborn babies. She explained to the babies that it was necessary to have this, that there were some difficulties and that he wasn't trying to hurt them, that he was actually helping them come into this world. So he had a very intimate connection with the child. I don't think, unfortunately, most doctors are at the point of Dr. Ikegawa, but hopefully they'll be getting there soon. So in the case of Sina, in 2009, I asked permission to do forceps delivery and delivered a baby boy, Sina. And that little boy did not cry. This was the experience when he had this communication before he did the delivery. Now, what happened? When Sina was 3, his mother was pregnant and came to the clinic and waited for, Sina waited for his brother to be born. So Sina was in the waiting room with his father and crawled under his shirt at one point and smiled and said to his father, "Let's go. I shall be born. Please pull my head." And he said it in such a fun-loving way. There was no feeling that this was a traumatic experience for the little boy. Dr. Ikegawa had done real magic with that little boy. And he said, I judged that Sina had retained a memory he retained memory of the forceps delivery. There's no question about that. He put his head under his dad's shirt and then wanted to be born and have his dad pull his head as if it was the most fun thing to do. So he didn't have anything unpleasant to remember about that experience. So that's amazing, because the forceps is not a pleasant experience, but he was able to neutralize that. And I say this is an expression of Sina's ability to sense the love of Dr. Kagawa. He wasn't trying to harm the little baby. Babies know whether or not they are welcomed into the world with love. So that's one of the major advanced abilities of baby, whether they're in the womb or whether they're being birthed, as in this case. And here we have a picture of Sina and his little baby newborn brother, and this more complex consciousness of the babies demands a new standard of medical care that includes the power of love, and we see that Dr. Ikagawa handled that situation in his practice. And these are some of the books Dr. Ikagawa has written. There's some in English, but many books he's been writing for the last several decades on pre-birth children, pre-birth memories, and advice for parents about pre-birth communications. For example, if a baby is breech during the pregnancy, he will advise the mother, talk to your baby and tell your baby to flip the other way, and keep doing that. And the mothers have the experience, oh, the baby is now flipped. So that's pretty nice cooperation. Now let's go to another birth memory. And this is a little boy named John, who also experiences not only the memory of birth, but again, the ability to sense love. And this story comes from a special person in the field of pre and perinatal psychology, Dr. Wendy Ann McCarty, and she's also an author, and she's a child-centered family therapist for children imprinted by early traumas, and she's helped thousands of cases here in the United States. And she says, we're talking here about this compassionate, authentic conversation. Many healings happen in the children when parents tell their children what really happened during pregnancy or at birth. And it is never too early, and it is never too late to talk things over. And there's even 70-year-old mothers talking to their 50-year-old children, and healing happens. So it's never too late. And in these cases, we're talking about little children, but. All right, so one mother told her, I always reminded my kids on their birthdays about the day they were born in pretty terms. Oh, you came out and we loved you. But my son John did not have a sweet birth. It was very difficult. And so one day she decided to have this conversation and tell him. We were alone together in the car, and he was in his car seat. I said, I want to tell you more about your birth. And she said, we wanted to have you at home, but there were several difficulties, and we had to go to the hospital. It was really painful. And John chimed in, he's in his car seat. Baby was backwards. Ooh, wow. What did you say? Oh, I didn't say anything. It was that quick, his memory came out and then it went back in. So what we're talking about here when she said, yes, the baby was backwards, the baby was posterior, you are right. And you can see in the diagram here, on the right side of the screen. Posterior means that the spine of the baby is up against the spine of the mother. So the baby is facing outward, looking ahead. And that is a difficult position to maneuver through the birth canal, whereas the other position, the head goes through much more easily in the whole body, of course. So the little boy, nobody had ever told him, but he had a very difficult birth. So she went on. When you came out, you had this big crease across your forehead. You were all bruised. It looked like it had been really tight inside. I'm so sorry. It must have been painful. You cried and you cried and you cried so hard for hours. And I had some problems, so I could not hold you. We were separated and I couldn't comfort you. It broke my heart. I'm so sorry. And he didn't say anything. They were riding in the car and they got home. And then there was a dramatic change. But let's hear her say what his basic issue was here. From the time John was a baby, he cried a lot, and he cried very loud. And when he started talking, he talked at a shout. It was so consistent, we kept him away from places because he talked so loud, it was disruptive. We had his ears tested. We took him to behavioral training. Nothing helped. When I acknowledged how difficult his birth must have been and that I was sorry, John never talked loud again. Isn't that amazing? And this didn't take some weeks or months or something. They were having the conversation in the car, and when they got home, she noticed something was different in the house. What's different? Oh, John is not shouting. And so it was immediate. Just hearing the honest, authentic, compassionate truth that, I'm sorry that this happened. And Dr. McCarty analyzes it and says, it was as if that deep part in John hadn't been heard. Nobody, when he was crying from his pain as a newborn, nobody heard him. His mother didn't comfort him. She was taken into another room. And that is what he needed. He needed to be heard. He needed to be recognized and heard, and someone to care for him. She met that need when she told him, and the whole pattern melted away. So just think of all that they did before this. They went to the ear doctor, thought, well, maybe he has a hearing problem. And they went to behavioral training, but none of that. Our next story takes us into womb memory. And in this case, Kaku, who's a little 5-year-old Japanese boy in the story, also was aware of pain sensing and clairvoyant sensing. And this comes again from Dr. Ikagawa's research. One day, Kaku became very angry at his mother. Mom, why did you do that? A needle came in when I was in your tummy. It was very scary. Now, the backside of this story is 5-year-old Kaku is talking about something that happened to his mother when she went to the doctor. When he was this size, you can see in the palm, he was only 10 weeks old. When his mother had a chorionic villus sample with a catheter. And so his fetal body would have been a few mere inches long. And yet how could he see a needle coming in and also be fearful? these, and as we look at the examples of how it's done, it can be, the needle can come through, it's going to the placenta of the baby to get some tissue there, and it can be done transdermally through the abdomen if the placenta's on that side, or the needle can come up through the cervix if it's at the other side. So she was 10 weeks pregnant when he took the sample. I think that's truly amazing. And if she was a patient of Dr. Ikagawa, I'm sure, I don't know if she was or not. He may have just heard about this case, but I think it might have been a different doctor. But she could have prepped the baby ahead of time, if knowing what we're knowing today, and tell the little baby, don't worry, it's not gonna hit your body. It's gonna be okay. It'll miss you. It might look scary, but it'll be okay. So the example of seeing the needle is a clairvoyant ability to see people or events happening at a location beyond sight, or that are not visible using normal sight, as when baby's eyes are fused shut in the womb. Well, that baby's eyes were not open, that is for sure. And some more information about this. This is not unique. There have been many cases where parents have gone in for amniocentesis, for example, and the baby is watched on the screen, and the baby shows very strong emotion. And Dr. David Chamberlain, who's written a lot about birth psychology, said observations between 16 and 20 weeks of gestation during amniocentesis, that's where they're putting a needle through the abdominal area to get some liquid from the amniotic sac, reveal fearful reactions. Oftentimes the babies will be seen on the ultrasound screen, they're batting at the needle, or they're cringing and going off and hiding in another part of, as far away from the needle as possible. When they have found that their birth rate or their heart rate increases, and they withdraw from normal activity for a period of hours or even days. So this is something that could be averted through the techniques such as Dr. Kagawa uses of speaking to the baby ahead of time. The mother can even prepare the baby. Now we're moving to another interesting womb memory. Also, love sensing and clairvoyant sensing are part of this memory. And the mother relates that when she was pregnant with her son, Glenn, she had a sonogram at 20 weeks. She was starting to lose amniotic fluid, and so she went to the doctor. And he looked grim and explained, I've had pregnant women with low fluid, but this is the first time I've seen none. No amniotic fluid at 20 weeks. You have lost all the fluid due to a tear in the membrane that contains the baby and the fluid surrounding it. This is a rare condition, usually fatal. There's nothing to be done. Your only option is to abort. And this mother did not go along with that. She had a deep intuition that everything was going to be okay. So she sought out another opinion. And the specialist she went to said, I'm here to support you, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do, we can work together. So she followed his guidance and did a lot of rest, and got to a point, I think about 4 weeks before the due date, and she was losing a lot of the fluid, if not all the fluid. And they said, we have to do an emergency cesarean. So she said, I knew with every ounce of my being that my baby was not only fine, but he would be born fine. And I think that's a projection of her love to the baby. And the baby was picking that up. And three days later, 3 days later, after she found out that she had lost all the fluid early on, this is in the 20 weeks. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit. So after the 20 weeks, when she first gets the evaluation, 3 days later, I felt my son flip and go breech. There was no padding from fluid. It was completely empty. So she felt the whole thing happen. By going breech, he plugged off the tear with his buttocks, and fluid was able to reaccumulate. That's at 20 weeks. He's doing this amazing experience, amazing action. This position, as we see here in the figure, is called a single footling breech. So the baby's feet are down at where the foot, it's standing upright basically in the womb as the mother's upright. And one leg is flexed and crossed in the usual breech, and the other is stuck straight out in an extended position. Prior to my son's birth, the longest time that a woman carried a baby after a premature rupture was 8 weeks. I carried Glenn 6 weeks. After he was born, the doctor said, your baby is an example of why doctors should not play God. As a result of Glenn's pre-birth conditions, he could not bend the knee that had been in that extended position. And so they had corrective surgery at the age of 8. And this is the first time the parents heard Glenn relate his memory. He told the doctor, I remember when I was inside my mother, all of a sudden one day something happened and I couldn't move. I was being squeezed. All the fluid was gone. I stuck out my legs so I couldn't get squeezed out and died from being born too early. Wow, is that a sophisticated thought? The doctor, what did he say? Wow. I have never heard such a complete and accurate description of premature membrane rupture from a child, in a child's words, and from a child's point of view. And the revelation was completely shocking to both of the parents. Kate said, I have never talked about the circumstances surrounding his birth in front of my son. I didn't think he would ever understand all of the complexities. And I interviewed Glenn also, besides the mother, and he was 22 at this time when I talked to him. And he said, as long as I can remember, I knew my knee problem was because of the way I was born. And when I was 5 or 6, my first grade teacher asked, why don't you run and play at recess with the other kids? How come you're not outside playing? My leg is messed up. Well, how was your leg messed up? It's because of the way I was born. So he had this amazing memory. And I think the awareness of his mother's love was also there that helped them get through this, like an unbelievable birth of a child in these circumstances. And another story to share is Carmen's womb memory. And again, love sensing. Love sensing, you see, is coming up quite a bit on each of these cases. And this is coming from Dr. Wendy McCarty. And we had an earlier experience where she gave the example of the boy born posterior And then the healing where he was talking loud and he didn't do it anymore when he heard the real story. So now we're having another example of that coming up in terms of womb memory. So she says couples oftentimes have very mixed feelings when they find out they're pregnant. And after a month or so, they may come to peace with it and they start to get ready for the baby. But from the baby's standpoint, the baby needs to go back to that original place where they discovered they were pregnant and talk about their feelings. So we have a situation here where the father is telling us this story. His name is Eduardo. And he said, when my wife became pregnant with my fourth daughter, I was angry. I didn't want more children. We had been trying not to have more children. I was angry throughout the whole pregnancy. I just withdrew into work. After my daughter Carman was born, she and I never really clicked. Everything changed when she was 2. That was after I attended Dr. McCarty's seminar and learned about the conscious baby before birth and how important it is to welcome the baby before birth. Dr. McCarty taught when things aren't ideal, we can turn it around by talking to our child in a caring way. It is never too late. So after getting that information from Dr. McCarty, he realized he had done his daughter an injustice. Babies need to be properly welcomed, and he hadn't done that. So he decided to do something about that and speak to his daughter, which he did as soon as he got this information. And this is what he said. I want to tell you, when you first came into mommy's tummy, when we found out we were pregnant, I was angry because I didn't want another child. I did you a dishonor. You're a beautiful girl, a beautiful human being. You deserve to be welcomed by your father. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you weren't welcomed by me at first. I want you to know that. And the little girl didn't say anything. There was no other part of the conversation. But then the next day, everything shifted. She came running into the room, skipping into the room, and she gave him a big hug, and they bonded. And so again, how quick was that? Overnight, we see the change has happened in the child. Just like the little boy who heard about his birth experience from his mother in the car, and as soon as they get home in the house, he's no longer shouting. I just think this is just miraculous. And he said that conversation changed my life, and it changed the life of my child. Now we're going to leave womb memories and talk about the next type of memory, conception memory. And this one has to do also with clairvoyant sensing. And there's actually 3 types of conception memories that we have encountered. And we're only going to deal with one type here. But one type is memory of the sperm race. Number 2 is observing the sexual act of the parents. And number 3, IVF memory. So Barbara, the mother, shares the story about her little daughter, Leon. Starting at the age of 4, Leon began telling me about how She was hurtling and rushing to be the winner. And she would say, when I was in there were all these sorts of traps, almost like an obstacle course. I had to go through things to keep from being killed. And we see up here the sperm racing to get to the egg, and we see one sperm making the goal. And she said, I kept racing and racing. I almost got caught a few times, but I got my way through. I got there first. I was super happy. And when she was 3 or 4, she started drawing mandalas, as we can see here. And her mother said, I never asked her what her drawings were because I didn't want her to think that she had to draw something. Now I can clearly see the egg and sperm. And we can see here the different layers of the egg and all these sperm around the edge. That is amazing. Another example of a child representing its memories in the womb and even going back to conception comes to us from French psychologist Veronica Mars and her husband Olivier Mars. And they collected children's drawings worldwide. And unfortunately for us who don't speak French, it's all in French. And but we can pick up something from the presentation. Sometimes they speak in English. In this case, this is a picture from the book of a 3-year-old child, Maria, and they claim that this is a sperm drawing, the way she has portrayed compared to the sperm on the right. And I agree, that's very interesting parallel. And among other things, she was drawing also womb time memories. And in Japan, we have another example. 3 examples of children who are representing their memories of conception and the sperm race and drawing it. Isu Yamamoto, and then Dr. Isagawa gives us this story. And when he was about 3 years old, he started talking to his mother. I became like a long worm. There were hundreds of us bumping shoulders. In the end, I was the only one left. So he would drop comments like that. And then at the age of 6, he started to draw all of his memories, conception memories, womb memories, birth memories. And he drew the whole sequence of the stages of the body as it developed from fertilization to birth, including the sperm race. And the mother brought the drawings to a professor of embryology at the university, and he said even though it was simplistic to some degree, it was all very accurate, the stages the little boy was drawing. And here we have his picture of the sperm race. It says like we were racing and it was like I came in first. And the mother said, he said that there were microbes, like an earthworm. That's how he would describe it. He doesn't know what a sperm is at that age. And at first, many of these microbes existed, and finally I became alone. And then the different stages here. He was interviewed by Dr. Isagawa when he was 9 years old. And here he's explaining his drawings, and he said, this is when I was like a sludge worm. And then the next drawing, and then my body became pustular, and I became like this. And you can see here all the different stages he's representing in his little diagram. So, the 4th type of memory we're considering now, preconception memory. Now, people can usually accept, oh, yes, the baby could remember birth. Well, maybe it could remember being in the womb. Well, I don't know if it could remember conception. It starts getting harder and harder to grapple with that idea. And now we're going even beyond physical now. We're going beyond conception, and we're talking about memories. Basically, 3 different areas of found when we start looking at children's preconception memories. They remember being in another realm before birth, heaven, sky, above the clouds. They'll have different names for this existence. A large portion of them recall choosing their parents, peering down at earth from the clouds, or looking through a portal. And they'll also talk about guides or God or angels or departed family members that they met or who helped them find their parents. So these are a very big part of our research, the preconception memories, and it's amazing how many of the children have memories that go this far back, before the physical body, before our brain. And we just talked about Istu, who did all those drawings of the stages of from fertilization to birth. And he also has a memory. Before I was born, I was an invisible ball, so tiny you couldn't see me. I was playing around, jumping in a place like a universe with no stars. So we add that to the beautiful story that he's already given about his other memories. And next, we want to share Santiago. Mom, I came down from heaven to earth through a tunnel, a stream of light from dark to light. I traveled in a force. Now, when his mother heard this, she said, even though my 5-year-old son, Santiago, was going to church regularly and we learned how to pray, no one taught him that he was in heaven before he was born, or that he traveled here through a tunnel. And then when he's 6 years old, we were sitting down for dinner. He became serious, looked straight into my eyes, and said, when I was in heaven, I talked to the Lord about my future parents. Mom, God gave me 2 choices. A couple with several children. I laughed. And to my right, he showed me you, all by yourself. His mother said, well, why would you want to go with this single woman, meaning herself? Why would you want to do that rather than a family that's a union? God said that woman will definitely have more time, patience, and love for you than the family who already have children. God told me to go into your belly because I would save you from a sad life. I told God that I would love you and take care of you. Then I was shot through the sky into your womb and I became your son. I saved you, Mom. I couldn't hold back the tears. I knew he was telling the truth. He is an angel who was sent from heaven to help me through a severe problem. I had been addicted to drugs and left abandoned and pregnant. I surrendered everything for this little boy living inside of me when I got pregnant. I went to a homeless shelter for 18 months. At this proud moment, everything has turned around. I have a beautiful boyfriend who loves my son as much as his own child. I have a career and own a 2-bedroom apartment and a car. I'm proud of my God-given journey. God truly blessed me with a beautiful child and a concentration to grow as a queen. Santiago makes my life worth living. He is full of love, patience, and guidance of an angel on earth. Wow, that is amazing. Now we go back to Japan. We have another story from Dr. Ikagawa's research. And this one, I'm kind of bringing in a lot of the memories because he has preconception, womb, and birth. He doesn't have conception memories, but pretty good. He's got 3 out of the 5 that we studied. His preconception. I flew in the sky and looked down for Mommy because it was my turn. My turn to be born. I looked all over the world and found the mother that he has now, and she was the best. I saw fairies when I was up in the clouds, as well as one orb hovering above my mother. Many fairies went with me into my mother's tummy. They stayed with me to make body parts that became a human. And then the other fairies, they ascended back to above the clouds. And this is interesting. When I was in my mother's tummy, I saw her swimming in the ocean with dolphins. And that's definitely correct. His mother went swimming at Ogasawara with the dolphins in her 25th week of pregnancy. Now, as the time for birth came, when the fairies were finished creating his body, they gave me a signal. It's time to be born. It was hard when I was born, but not painful. Naturally, I went slowly by myself. I opened and opened because the hole was tiny. So that's a beautiful story again from Dr. Ikugawa's research. Now, let's move to the fifth type of memory, the past life memory. And this comes from Kiara, a little girl in South Africa. And her grandmother actually gave me the story. And Trisha, the grandmother, said when Kiara was born, it happened 18 years after she was married to her second husband. So the second husband had no biological connection to the granddaughter. He was like the step-grandfather. But since the moment of her birth, John had a very strong bond with her. So as I said, she's not a blood relative of John. And John has never been fond of children. But Kiara flipped something in him. You can see all the pictures where they're enjoying their time together in nature and at the ocean. The day Kiara was born was definitely a turning point. From then on, John worked very hard on his own spiritual development and became more content in his life. Now, this is the cool part of the story. The memory comes in. One day, John became tired of playing horsey and crawling around with 2-year-old Kiara on his back. John asked Kiara, "Oh, go put your dolls to sleep." He wanted to take a break from that. "No, you must lay down and sleep on the doll's pillow. You are my baby." Obediently, John did that. Kiara mothered him and covered him with her little doll blanket. Then Kiara told John, "I know what to do, how to feed a baby and make him go to sleep. I remember the time when I was your mommy and you were my baby." Wow. Kiara was firm and commanding and told John, "Close your eyes and go to sleep." John acted like a baby and curled his body and closed his eyes. The moment passed so quickly, said the grandmother, and we were so surprised. We didn't think of asking questions. And then when I composed myself and asked for details, Kiara stared at me blankly as if it never happened. The memory came on, and then it was gone. So that wraps up the 5 types of memories and bringing in some of the special abilities that we find along the way, the love sensing, the pain sensing, the clairvoyance, and let's just review our key points. Babies are conscious and aware from the beginning of life. Hopefully we've given you enough examples for you to consider that that's a possibility at least. And how babies are conceived and carried in the womb and birth is etched in their body and psyches. And you see examples of how in therapy or the obstetrician, Dr. Ikazawa, how certain things that are normally traumatic can be nuked in the bud, nipped in the bud. And the more complex consciousness of babies demands a new standard of medical care that includes the power of love. Dr. Ikazawa's example of delivering the baby with forceps and the baby considering it fun. That is really demonstrating. I'd like to just do a couple little poems before we close. This is from Wordsworth. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. Our soul, our life star, hath elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, but not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but in trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. And another description of the journey comes from Rabindranath Tagore in India. The time that my journey takes is long, and the way of it long. I came out on the chariot of the first gleam of light, and pursued my voyage through the wilderness of worlds, leaving my track on many a star and planet. The traveler has to knock at every door to come to his own. And when one has to wander through all the outer world to reach the innermost shrine at the end, my eyes strayed far and wide before I shut them and said, here you are. The question and the cry, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Melt into tears of 1,000 streams and deluge the world with a flood of assurance. I am. So I thank you for this opportunity to present our research, as we can see in these 3 wonderful books. And I thank all the folks who I interviewed, the parents and the children, and all the stories we shared today. And I thank the great researchers and therapists who are working in this field and bringing more enlightened ways to bring children into the world and make it a better world. And I also thank my husband, Dr. Neil Carman, who told me back in 1989 when I started collecting stories, and I thought I was going to write a little magazine article, and he said, Elizabeth, this is more than a magazine article. This is a book or a series of books. This is an untold cosmic story about how we come into this world. Wow, thank you, Neil.